pay attention. Welcome to this trip through one of the most disturbing cases in U.S. history. Before we start, please leave a comment telling us where you are watching from and what time it is when you listen to this narration. We want to know where and when these documented accounts get to. A worn leather journal was found hidden behind a loose stone in the cellar wall of the Blackwood estate in the fall of 1852. Dr. Edwin Blackwood used to be a well-respected doctor, but his reputation has faded into whispers over time. The writing on those old pages got more and more messy as the last entries were written, but what they said would never be recorded in the county records. William Porter, the courthouse clerk who first looked at the journal, said that the contents were too disturbing for the public to know about. Judge Hamilton Rutherford quickly ordered them to be sealed. The Blackwood property was at the end of Willow Creek Road, which is about 5 miles outside of Millfield, Virginia. Edwin's grandfather, a tobacco merchant who made a lot of money during the colonial period, built the main house in the late 1700s. It was a 2-story Georgian building. The estate was in bad shape by the time our story starts in 1845. The white paint was peeling off the outside walls, and ivy had started to take back the eastern side. People who lived nearby would often take the longer way into town instead of going straight past the Blackwood gates. What happened inside those walls would stay mostly a mystery until 1868, when a fire destroyed most of the east wing of the estate. During the restoration work that followed, workers found a secret room behind the library. The county surveyor carefully wrote down the room size, which was 7 feet by 12 feet. The surveyor's official report, on the other hand, did not mention the scratch marks that were all over the inside walls. The Blackwood family used to be well known in Virginia society. Edwin went to the University of Pennsylvania to study medicine and then came back to his family's estate in 1839. Margaret Wilson Blackwood, his wife, came from a well-known family in Charleston. People knew her for being quiet and not going to many social events. Margaret had twin daughters between 1840 and 1842. Sarah Jenkins, the local midwife, was there when the baby was born, but she never talked about it publicly again. After she died in 1865, her personal diary was found. In it, she wrote only, "May God forgive me for what I saw in that house and for not speaking up afterward." People never saw the Blackwood twins in public. Dr. Blackwood would say that they had a weak constitution that made it necessary for them to stay inside when asked. Church records show that twin girls named Elizabeth and Catherine Blackwood were baptized in April 1842. The ceremony took place at the estate, not at the Millfield Episcopal Church, where the family had a pew. Dr. Blackwood owned 7 slaves in 1845, according to county tax records. Samuel, Joseph, Thomas, William, Henry, Jacob, and Daniel are the names that show up in the ledger. The ages given for Samuel and Joseph, both 22, make it seem like they might have been twins, but this wasn't made clear. It is clear from the documents that are still around that Dr. Blackwood paid these 2 men a lot more than was normal for the area. This suggests that they were worth more than just their ability to work. In the winter of 1849, Dr. Blackwood suddenly fired all of his household staff, except for the enslaved people he owned. This was the start of what would later be called the Blackwood Incident. Martha Collins, who had been the housekeeper for 15 years, later told her cousin that she had been told to leave after hearing sounds coming from the sealed east wing of the house that no Christian should ever hear. The Millfield Historical Society has a copy of her letter that talks about how the doctor spoke quietly about the procedure and preparation for the ceremony. James Wilson, Margaret Blackwood's brother, came to visit from Charleston in January 1850 without warning. Joseph Miller, who owns Millfield's only inn, said that Mr. Wilson seemed very upset and insisted on seeing his sister, even though Dr. Blackwood had told him not to let anyone else in. Thomas Green, a carpenter from the area who was fixing a fence near the property, saw the fight that followed. Green told the sheriff that he saw 2 men he thought were the doctor's slaves forcibly remove Mr. Wilson from the estate. 3 days later, James Wilson's horse was found wandering along the Petersburg Road, but Wilson was never seen in Millfield again. In February 1850, the Charleston Courier ran a short notice saying that James Wilson, a businessman, had gone missing while visiting family in Virginia. The notice asked for any information about where he was, but there was never a follow-up article. When Charleston officials called Millfield sheriff, they were told that Mr. Wilson had left the area after a short visit and that his destination was unknown. Dr. Blackwood's journal entries from this time show that he was becoming more and more concerned with what he called the anatomical uniqueness of his daughters. Even though he didn't say what was wrong with them, medical historians who have looked at the text think he was talking about some kind of conjoined twins. In an entry from the 3rd of March 1850, he wrote, "Their connection is both a remarkable scientific curiosity and an unprecedented opportunity. What God has joined together can indeed be put asunder, but perhaps there exists a more perfect solution, one that serves both science and necessity." Central Virginia saw a lot of rain in the spring of 1850, which was unusual. The creek that ran behind the Blackwood property flooded twice, and some of the garden wall was swept away. While fixing this wall, a stonemason named Frederick Thompson found a small leather pouch with what looked like human hair of 2 different colors, one auburn and one dark brown. The hair was tied together with silk thread. Thompson gave this find to Reverend Michael Scott of the Millfield Episcopal Church. Later, Reverend Scott said he had burned it because it had pagan significance. In his sermon on the 7th of April, 1850, Reverend Scott talked a lot about unnatural practices and ungodly experimentation, but he never named the Blackwood family. Records of church attendance show that Dr. Blackwood was there for this sermon. It was the last time he would be seen in public until September. There wasn't much activity at the Blackwood estate during the summer months. Food and other supplies were still being dropped off at the gate, but no one was allowed to go past it. Dr. James Harrison, a former medical school classmate of Blackwood's, was the only one who came to see him twice in July. Harrison wrote to his wife in a letter that was found among his personal effects after his death in 1859. He said, "I can scarce believe what Edwin intends. He speaks of joining what nature had already joined, but in a manner most perverse. I have advised against this course, but fear my counsel falls on deaf ears. The girls, who are now 8 years old, seem to understand what their father wants, and their silent terror is more than I can bear to see." Several people in Millfield said they heard screams coming from the Blackwood estate on the 15th of August, 1850. Sheriff William Davis and 2 deputies rode out to look into the matter, but Dr. Blackwood turned them away at the gate, saying that his wife was suffering from female hysteria and was sedated. The sheriff didn't push the issue because he didn't have a warrant and didn't see any reason to be alarmed right away. Later on, when the whole story came out, this decision would be heavily criticized. Dr. Blackwood's journal entries from late August showed how carefully he was getting ready for what he called the unification ceremony. He wrote about how he chose Samuel and Joseph from among his slaves because they were Kruger twins, but they didn't have the physical connection that my daughters did. He talked about giving all 4 young people different drugs, but he used code words for the exact drugs. Medical historians think that these probably included laudanum, ether, and maybe other experimental sedatives that doctors of the time could use. Dr. Blackwood wrote to the county clerk on the 1st of September 1850 asking for 2 marriage licenses to be made. The clerk asked for more information because the Blackwood daughters were only 8 years old, and this request was strange. The county archives have a record of the doctor's response, which said that the licenses were for adult wards under my legal protection, and that the payment was much higher than the normal fee. The licenses were given out as requested, but they would never be valid with a minister's signature. We have put together what happened on the night of September 3rd from bits and pieces of evidence. Dr. Blackwood's journal talks about getting the room ready with surgical tools, restraints, and what he called the binding agents. He wrote about putting his 4 young daughters, his conjoined daughters, and the 2 enslaved twins in a way that he thought would be symmetrical unification. The most disturbing part says, "As they are joined to each other, so shall they be joined to their husbands, forming a perfect circle of flesh. What begins as four shall function as one. After this, the journal entries get harder and harder to understand. There are hints in the procedure that doctors support. Blackwood tried to join all four people together in some way through surgery, but the details of this operation are thankfully still unclear. What is certain is that on September 4th, the doctor's wife, Margaret, somehow got away from the estate and was found walking along the Petersburg Road in a very bad state. Even though she looked fine, her clothes were soaked with blood. When Margaret Blackwood finally got to the sheriff's office, she couldn't give a clear account of what had happened. She only said one thing, over and over. The circle is complete. After that, she was moved to Western State Hospital in Stratton, where she stayed until she died in 1863. The hospital records say that she has incurable melancholia and sometimes fights back violently. The doctor who saw her said that during these episodes, she would try to pull her hands away from her wrists and say they belonged to someone else. On the morning of September 5th, Sheriff Davis and 5 armed deputies went to the Blackwood estate. They saw that the main house was unlocked and looked like it had been left behind. A full search turned up no sign of Dr. Blackwood, his daughters, or any of the people who were enslaved. The only place they couldn't get to was a locked room in the east wing. The door to this room had been bricked over and plastered so that it almost blended in with the wall around it. Sheriff Davis decided not to break through this wall because there was no clear crime and it would have been against the law to destroy private property. This choice would be changed in October after a number of residents said they saw lights moving behind the east wing windows at night. When the police finally broke into the locked room on October 12, they found it completely empty. The walls had been painted white and the floor had been scrubbed clean. The only signs that someone had been there were a circle of small holes in the wooden floor, which could have been made by medical restraints, and a faint, copper-like smell that one deputy said smelled like a slaughterhouse after washing day. A later search of the estate grounds found no human remains. They dragged the well and dug up some areas of recently disturbed earth, but they didn't find anything that proved anything. Some people thought that bodies might have been buried on the creek bank and then washed away by the current, but this theory could not be proven. People said for years that Dr. Blackwood had run away to Europe or South America, but no one ever saw him again. In 1855, a man who fit his description was said to be working as a doctor in Brazil, focusing on anatomical uniqueness, but Brazilian officials could not confirm who this person was. If it weren't for the discovery of a series of detailed anatomical drawings in the office of a recently deceased Philadelphia doctor who had written to Dr. Blackwood, the Blackwood case might have been forgotten by now. The medical archives at the University of Pennsylvania now hold these drawings, which show what looks like an attempt to surgically connect 4 human bodies in a circle. There are notes in handwriting that looks like Blackwood's that explain a theory of shared circulation and a unified nervous response. Modern medical experts have confirmed that this kind of procedure would have killed everyone involved. In 1868, workers found a small box sealed inside the wall cavity when they were fixing up the library after a fire. They also found the hidden room behind the library. The box held 4 wedding bands that were all the same size and design. Each one had the same date, the 3rd of September 1850, engraved on it. James Edwards, the foreman who found the rings, wrote that they were in a perfect circle and were connected by what looked like strands of human hair that had been braided together. Edwards said that when he tried to separate the rings, he felt a sudden chill, as though someone had put ice against the back of my neck. The rings were later moved to the county courthouse to be kept safe, but they disappeared from the evidence room in 1872. The last known mention of the Blackwood case is from an 1879 interview with Thomas Johnson, one of the slaves who had been sold away from the estate just before Dr. Blackwood fired his staff in 1849. Johnson, who was then living as a free man in Massachusetts, said that Samuel and Joseph had told him that they were afraid of the doctor's plan. Johnson says that the twins heard Blackwood talk about a way for 4 bodies to share one life. Johnson's story includes the disturbing detail that the doctor thought this setup would create a perfect balance of male and female energies that would last forever through circular connection. The Blackwood estate was empty for decades and was in terrible shape by the early 1900s. A development company bought the land in 1967 with plans to build a residential subdivision. During the first digging, workers found a small room underground, close to where the east wing used to be. There was a round metal box inside that was sealed with lead. Richard Thompson, the owner of the company, is said to have opened this container by himself before county officials got there. He never said what he found, but he stopped working on the project right away and gave the land to the county as a nature preserve. He said that no buildings should ever be built on the site again. The Blackwood Preserve area is still mostly untouched today. There are hiking trails that go around the property, but not through it. People who live nearby say they sometimes hear what sounds like children's voices near the old foundation stones, but only after dark. The stories from several unrelated visitors who, without knowing anything about the site's history, have said they felt like someone was trying to pull their hands away from their arms while they were passing the spot where the east wing used to be, are probably the most disturbing. Michael Collins, a graduate student, tried to put together a full account of the Blackwood case for his doctoral dissertation in 1968. Collins stopped working on the project and left the university after 6 months of research. When a coworker asked him about his choice, he said, "Some circles are not meant to be broken." His research notes were never found. County records from 1969 show the last official mention of the Blackwood case. That year, the Historical Society tried to put up a marker at the estate site to remember it. The county board unanimously turned down the proposal, and the minutes only said that some history should remain unremembered. No one has brought it up in public since then. We may never know for sure what happened to Elizabeth and Catherine Blackwood and the enslaved twins Samuel and Joseph. The Virginia Historical Society has a single photograph of the East Wing before it was destroyed in a fire in 1868, but it is in sealed archives. What looks like a face, or maybe more accurately, parts of 4 faces arranged in a circle can be seen in the upper window, but not very well even when you look closely. The face seems to be watching the world outside, with a gaze that belongs to no one living being. If Dr. Blackwood's impossible procedure somehow worked, not to create a sustainable life but to bind 4 souls together in pain forever, could they still be alive in some way, neither living nor dead, stuck in the endless circle he made? This is the most disturbing question for those who have studied this case in depth. Visitors to the preserve have heard scratching sounds over the years, but they have been explained away as branches hitting stone or animals in the underbrush. But people who have heard them say that there is a clear pattern. 4 scratches in a row, over and over again, as if 4 hands were trying to claw their way back to freedom and separation. As part of her research, Margaret Wilson, a local historian with no connection to the doctor's wife, spent one night near the ruins in 1965. She left before dawn and wouldn't talk about what happened. Her journal, which was found after her death in 1968, was the only place where her observations were recorded. The last entry says, "They still move as one. God help them. They still move as one." The most merciful conclusion might be that Dr. Edwin Blackwood's experiment failed right away, killing everyone involved. The other option, that his perfect circle somehow lived on, is too horrible to think about. The whispers, on the other hand, keep going, and the land stays the same, as if the earth itself won't let go of what happened there in the fall of 1850. If you're thinking about going to Blackwood Preserve to find answers, think about the words carved into a tree at the edge of the property. They were found in 1955 and are said to have been done by an unknown hand. What joins cannot be severed? What is bound cannot be freed. The circle remains unbroken. Local authorities have taken this carving down several times, but it always comes back a few days later, with the new cuts weeping a substance that has never been conclusively identified. Some secrets are too well hidden to be found. Some histories are too dark to be brought to light. And some bonds once they are made, can never be broken. Not by time, not by death, and not even by the strongest will to separate what has been so unnaturally joined. We don't know where Dr. Edwin Blackwood's journal is right now. The last confirmed sighting was in 1969, when a clerk at the courthouse said it had been moved to a safe place to be kept. There is no official record of this transfer. Like so much of this sad history, it has simply disappeared, maybe for the best, into the shadows of the past. But in the quiet of Blackwood Preserve, where no birds sing and no animals live, something still moves in slow, coordinated patterns. It breathes as one, but suffers as four. It keeps up the endless, impossible dance of separate consciousness trapped in unified flesh, waiting for someone to finish the circle once more. In 1969, Dr. Ellen Reynolds, who works in the Department of Anthropology at the University of Virginia, got a package with no return address. Inside were old papers. One of them was a partial transcript of an interview from 1874 with a woman known only as M.J. Some researchers think she was Mary Jenkins, the daughter of Sarah Jenkins, the midwife who helped deliver the Blackwood twins. The interview, which was done by a member of the Virginia Medical Historical Society, has upsetting details that aren't in other accounts. M.J. said that her mother told her on her deathbed that the Blackwood twins were connected at the lower spine and shared part of their pelvic area, but otherwise had fully formed separate bodies. With the right care, the condition could have been lived with, but it would have been very hard. According to her daughter's testimony, what bothered Sarah Jenkins the most was not the physical connection between the girls, but how quickly Dr. Blackwood reacted when he saw them. M.J. said, "He didn't look at them like a father would be upset or a doctor would be interested." Remembered her mother saying, "But with the look of a man who has found something he has been looking for a long time, something unnatural." The transcript shows that M.J. gave more information about Dr. Blackwood's behavior after that, but these parts were heavily redacted before the document was put away. In this part, the only words that can be read are, "He spoke often of balance and completion, of four parts making a perfect whole." Dr. Reynolds tried to find the original, unredacted transcript, but he found that the Virginia Medical Historical Society had destroyed all records of the interview. When she asked about the difference, she was told that there had never been an interview like that. County officials turned down Dr. Reynolds' later request to visit the Blackwood Preserve for research. In her field journal, which was found among her things after she went missing in 1969, she wrote, "Something or someone does not want this history examined too closely." About a year after Dr. Blackwood's journal was found, a traveling doctor named Dr. Thomas Harper said he saw something strange in the medical field while he was passing through a remote part of North Carolina in 1853. In a letter to a colleague at Harvard Medical School, Harper talked about being called to a remote cabin to look at what the locals called the joined ones. When he got there, he saw four people arranged in what he called a living circle, with surgical changes that had made them permanently connected. As Harper writes about how the females were naturally joined at the spine and surgically connected to the males at the abdomen, his letter becomes more and more angry. This made a continuous circle of flesh. Harper says that the four people, two females who looked like they were in their late teens and two males who looked like they were the same age, could only move in coordinated patterns, as if they were one organism with four semi-autonomous parts. Harper's most troubling observation was that even though they couldn't talk, they seemed to communicate through synchronized movements and expressions that suggested a shared consciousness along with individual awareness, which he called a medical impossibility that nevertheless presented itself before my eyes. Harper said that the cabin's caretaker, an old man who wouldn't give his name, told him that a well-dressed man had given him the circle 3 years ago and paid a lot of money for their continued care and privacy. The caretaker said that he fed and cleaned the people who were together, but he did not bother them in their specially built room, which was a round room with no furniture, just a padded floor and walls. Harper's letter says he plans to come back with co-workers to document this one-of-a-kind medical event, but there is no record of him doing so. In fact, when Harvard Medical School's historical archives were looked through in 1962, It was found that there had never been a doctor named Thomas Harper who worked there, and there was no record of his medical license in any state. A fire in 1857 destroyed a cabin in western North Carolina that was far away from other buildings. The cabin's elderly occupant and 4 other people died, but their bodies were too badly damaged to be identified. The local coroner's report only said that the 4 bodies were found in the middle of the building, arranged in a circle that made it look like they had been holding on to each other when they died. There was no more investigation, and the bodies were buried on the property in graves that were not marked. A private research foundation with ties to the federal government bought the land where this cabin stood in 1960. In 1962, an executive order about national security put all records of the deal under lock and key. Satellite images from 1967 show a small building on the site, but by 1969 the area had been completely cleared and replanted with native trees, which made it impossible to find any signs of human activity. An article in the little-known Medical Curiosities Quarterly from 1885 talked about a strange case that Dr. Edwin Blackwood supposedly wrote about before he went missing. The article, written by someone with the initials J.H., possibly James Harrison, who used to work with Blackwood, talked about a theoretical way to make a unified circulatory system between several people that would cause them to have the same physiological responses and possibly even the same consciousness. The editors of the journal said that the article had been published by mistake, so it was taken out of the next issue. All copies of the issue with the article were taken back, but there are rumors that one is still in a private collection. Robert Williams, a linguistics professor, wrote a paper in 1964 about what he called the quadruple speech pattern. He said he had recorded it near the Blackwood Preserve. Williams thought that this could be either an amazing way for 4 people to coordinate their voices or a single entity with more than one speech center. The academic community mostly ignored his paper, and the next year Williams took back what he had said, saying that the recording was due to a problem with the equipment. He quit his job at the university not long after that and moved to Switzerland, where he supposedly refused to talk about his past research until he died in 1968. The recording that went along with his published analysis showed what looked like a single voice, but when it was looked at with a spectrograph, it showed 4 different speech patterns that were perfectly in sync. Sheriff Thomas Anderson, who was in charge of Millfield County from 1958 to 1968, may have given the strongest proof that something from Dr. Blackwood's experiment may have lived on. He said that while he was alone and looking into the East Wing Foundation ruins at dusk, he saw a figure, or at least what he thought was a single figure, moving around. As Anderson got closer, he saw that he wasn't watching one person, but 4 beings moving in perfect harmony, connected to each other in a way that didn't make sense from a biological point of view. He said there were 2 women and 2 men, all adults in terms of physical development, but with faces that had never aged properly, stuck somehow between childhood and adulthood. Anderson said that the 4 turned to look at him at the same time, and their eyes moved and focused in the same way, as if they were all being controlled by one mind. Anderson said that when he yelled at them, they ran away into the shadows in a way that was not human. They rolled forward in a coordinated tumble that kept their circular connection. When he followed, he only found a freshly dug-up patch of dirt near the old foundation, as if something had recently dug a hole in the ground. County officials sealed Anderson's statement, and it might have stayed hidden forever if a clerk hadn't made a mistake while digitizing records in 1968. Anderson gave county officials a sworn statement just before he retired, in which he talked about how he handled reports of people trespassing at the Blackwood Preserve in the spring of 1965. The document was available for a short time in the county's electronic archive before it was taken down. Several researchers said they had downloaded copies before it was deleted, but none of them have been willing to share them publicly, saying they were told to do so by unnamed government agencies. A geological survey of the Blackwood Preserve in 1966 found a network of tunnels that ran from the estate's foundation to several places on the property. It looks like these tunnels were dug out not too long ago, probably in the last 20 years. They are about 5 feet wide. Records from the county show that a full exploration was planned, but then canceled for no clear reason. In 1967, concrete was used to seal off the entrances to these tunnels, supposedly for safety reasons. 7 people who were involved in different parts of the Blackwood case research went missing between 1967 and 1969. These included Dr. Ellen Reynolds, whose field journal was found at the Millfield County Library; Richard Thompson, the developer who found the lead container; Michael Collins, the graduate student who gave up on his dissertation; 2 county clerks who had worked with the original Blackwood documents; and a married couple who were seen taking pictures near the preserve. No one has ever found any evidence of any of these people, even after a lot of searching. The last known event in the Blackwood case happened in 1969, when Millfield County got an anonymous donation of $10,000 with the condition that the Blackwood Preserve never be developed. The bank records show that the money came from a Swiss account that was opened in 1851, just a few months after Dr. Blackwood went missing. Bank officials tried to find out more about the account's history and found that deposits had been made every 10 years, with the most recent one happening in 1961. No one ever found out where these funds came from. The donation came with a handwritten note that said, "The circle remains unbroken. Let us rest." The FBI did a handwriting analysis and found that the note matched samples of Dr. the Downwrong Edwin Blackwood's writing from the 1,840 seconds, which is impossible because more than 120 years had passed. The Bureau kept their full report secret, but they did say that the similarity is probably just a coincidence or a planned forgery. The Blackwood Preserve is still one of the least visited areas in the Virginia State Park system. Park rangers are told to keep people out after dark, but they are not told why this rule is in place. Internal Park Service memos say that all rangers who have patrolled the preserve at night have asked to be moved to other areas because of uncomfortable weather and sounds that can't be explained by known wildlife. As part of a statewide effort to protect the environment, an automated environmental monitoring station was put up near the center of the preserve in 2002. For about 6 months, the equipment worked normally before it started sending strange data. Sensors picked up what looked like 4 separate heartbeats that were perfectly in sync, always in the same place, but at different times of the night. When the technicians looked into it, they saw that the equipment was still working but had been moved around. The separate parts had been carefully moved to make a perfect circle. In 2003, the monitoring station was taken down, and no one has tried to put electronic equipment inside the preserve's boundaries since then. As part of different environmental studies, satellite images of the area always show an unexplained cold spot near where the original east wing was. This thermal anomaly stays the same no matter what the season or weather is like. In 2005, a group from the University of Virginia's Department of Anthropology asked for permission to use ground-penetrating radar to survey the preserve. They said they were there to find the unmarked graves that were thought to be on the property. The project was quickly canceled after the lead researcher on the team got an anonymous package with a single page ripped out of what looked like Dr. Blackwood's journal. The page had only 1 sentence on it, written in handwriting that got worse and worse as it went along. What has been joined must not be found. The most recent mention of the Blackwood case is in the private papers of Judge Caroline Harmon, who was on the Millfield County Court from 1990 to 2008. On the 18th of June 2007, she wrote in her personal journal that someone had come to her and said they knew about the Blackwood case and wanted the original documents to be sealed permanently for the safety of all concerned. Judge Harmon's entry includes the disturbing observation that the visitor's movement seemed oddly coordinated, as if each limb was responding to multiple control inputs. The next day, she said yes to the request and never wrote about it again. It might be best if the full truth about the Blackwood case stays hidden in broken records and sealed archives. Some parts of history are hard to understand because they are on the edge of what is known and what is too painful to think about. We know for sure that something is still in those woods, in that protected area where development is never allowed. This thing breathes, moves, and maybe even thinks in ways that challenge what we know about life, consciousness, and the natural order. For those who may still be interested in the Blackwood Preserve looking for answers or proof, here is one last piece of information. Since 1969, everyone who has gone there alone after dark has had the same dream the night after their visit. In this dream, they were in 4 places at once, seeing through 4 pairs of eyes, feeling with 4 bodies, and unable to leave a circle that has been there for over 170 years. The circle is still whole, and maybe that's for the best for the people who are stuck inside it. What doctor? Edwin Blackwood joined together in 1850 may exist in a state beyond our understanding of life or death, a perpetual unity that, if broken, could unleash something into the world that was never intended to exist.